Have you ever experienced that strange moment when everything around you seems too familiar? Not truly familiar like a clear memory, but familiar in the most unsettling way possible. You enter a place, hear a phrase, observe a banal scene, and suddenly something inside you triggers. A slight shiver. A feeling difficult to explain. A recognition that doesn't come with any real memory. And even before trying to understand what's happening, the feeling has already taken over. You don't think, you feel. This is the exact moment of déjà vu. And if you've ever experienced it, you know it's not logical. It's not rational. It doesn't come with an explanation. It simply happens intensely, quickly, and deeply emotionally. Often, it's so strong that it causes discomfort. Other times, it seems almost magical. But one thing is certain. Déjà vu is rarely neutral. It carries emotion. And this raises a question that many people have never stopped to ask. Why does this experience seem much more emotional than logical? Perhaps, while all this was happening, you tried to explain it to yourself internally. Have I been here before? Did I dream this? Has this happened before? But do you notice something curious? These questions come later. First comes the sensation. First comes the emotional impact. Logic arrives late, trying to grasp something that has already passed. Have you ever experienced this? If so, stay with me until the end because what you are about to discover may surprise you and completely change the way you understand your own mind. Déjà vu is one of the most common and, at the same time, most mysterious phenomena of the human brain. Almost everyone has experienced it at least once in their life. Yet, when it happens, the feeling is always one of strangeness. It seems like something has gone out of place. As if reality has taken a small leap off its axis. And the most intriguing thing is that, even without understanding, the brain reacts as if it were important. As if that sensation had some hidden meaning. That's why déjà vu is often accompanied by emotions like mild anxiety, surprise, intense curiosity, or even an inexplicable nostalgia. It's not just a, I think I've seen this before. It's a, this seems too real. And this emotional intensity leads many people to interpret déjà vu as something beyond a simple brain error. Some see it as intuition, others as a premonition, and still others as a forgotten memory that has resurfaced. But is that really the case? The most interesting thing is to realize that, during déjà vu, the brain doesn't behave like a logical investigator searching for answers. It behaves like an emotional interpreter of reality. It reacts before analyzing. It feels before explaining. And this says much more about how the human mind works than it seems at first glance. Déjà vu is not just a strange phenomenon. It's a direct window into understanding how emotion, memory, and perception mix inside your head. Perhaps you've never stopped to think about it this way. Perhaps you've always treated déjà vu as something curious but fleeting, a strange detail of everyday life. But what if this feeling reveals something profound about how the brain decides what to believe? What if it shows that, most of the time, we trust what we feel more than what we can explain? Stay with me because from here on out we're going to enter exactly that territory, where emotion and logic clash within the brain. And what begins as a simple, familiar sensation may reveal one of the most fascinating mechanisms of the human mind. And while you're recognizing yourself in these sensations, it's worth taking a quick break for something important. Not as a request, but as part of this conversation we're having here. If this topic resonates with you, if any phrase so far has made you think, this has happened to me, leave a comment. Tell us about your experience with déjà vu, what you felt at that moment, whether it was strange, intense, uncomfortable, or even fascinating. When you comment, you're not just talking to me, you're helping other people realize they're not alone in this experience. If this type of content captivates you, makes you reflect, and helps you better understand how your own mind works, liking the video is a simple yet powerful way to show it. This gesture tells the algorithm that this topic matters, that it deserves to reach more people who also experience these strange brain phenomena and have never had a clear explanation for them. Now, if you feel you want to continue exploring these mysteries with me, not in a sensationalist way but with curiosity, science, and depth, then subscribing to the channel makes all the difference. Each subscription helps this content continue to exist, to gain momentum, to reach further. And more than just numbers, it creates a community of people who enjoy questioning, observing, and understanding what happens inside their own minds. Everything we're building here only happens because there are people on the other side watching, reflecting, and participating. Your presence, your comments, your likes, and your subscriptions are what keep this conversation alive. So, if anything here has touched you in any way, feel free to participate. And now, let's move on because what comes next helps explain exactly why the brain reacts this way even before you can think about it. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding why the brain doesn't react rationally during déjà vu completely changes how we perceive this experience. When déjà vu happens, there's no conscious analytical process happening in the background. There's no logical verification, no deliberate comparison with real memories, no, let me think about this some more. What exists is an immediate, almost instinctive, internal reaction that manifests itself before any structured thought. The human brain wasn't designed to calmly analyze everything before reacting. It was shaped to ensure survival, adaptation, and speed. In normal, everyday situations this works very well. But in phenomena like déjà vu, this same mechanism ends up creating a strange side effect. The sensation arises first. The explanation comes later, and often never arrives. It's as if, for a few seconds, the brain presses an automatic button that activates the feeling of familiarity without consulting the system responsible for confirming whether it makes sense. This internal shortcut happens behind the scenes, beyond the reach of consciousness. And when you realize it, the emotion has already taken over. Rational thought arrives late, trying to understand something that has already been felt. This explains why déjà vu doesn't sound like a logical doubt, but like an emotional certainty. You don't think, maybe I've already experienced this. You feel, this is familiar. And this feeling is so compelling that, for a moment, it seems like absolute truth. The brain treats that sensation as something relevant even without proof. This is a fundamental point for understanding the emotional impact of déjà vu. There's a profound mechanism behind this, linked to how the brain interprets reality. Before any conscious reasoning, it evaluates the environment based on patterns, subtle signals, and internal sensations. This process happens all the time without you realizing it. It's what allows you to make quick decisions, adjust behaviors, recognize faces, and react to unexpected situations. In déjà vu, this system kicks in, but without the backing of logic. The result is a disconcerting experience. The mind senses that something fits but finds no real peace to justify it. This mismatch between sensation and explanation generates emotional unease. It's like being faced with a hidden truth that you feel exists but can't access. And the brain doesn't like gaps. It prefers a strong feeling to admitting it doesn't know. This is where an important aspect of the human mindset comes in. We deeply trust our internal sensations. Many decisions we make daily don't stem from pure logic, but from impressions, intuitions, and emotions. Déjà vu exposes this functioning in a raw way. It reveals that, at specific moments, the mind chooses to feel before understanding. And this has a much greater impact than it seems. When the brain reacts in this automatic way, it creates a silent narrative. Something inside you says that it matters, even without an apparent reason. This feeling can generate anxiety, intense curiosity, or even a slight unease, as if something were about to be revealed. Not because there is a real revelation, but because the brain associates emotion with importance. The more intense the feeling, the greater the impression of significance. This mechanism explains why so many people interpret déjà vu as something mystical, spiritual, or premonitory. Logic fails to offer quick answers and emotion takes over. It is in this space that symbolic interpretations arise, attempts to make sense of what has not been rationally explained. The brain prefers to create a story rather than accept the emptiness of uncertainty. But what's most fascinating is realizing that this process doesn't only happen in déjà vu. It reflects a very common way of mental functioning. In many life situations, feelings precede thoughts. Emotional reactions shape perceptions. Sensations influence decisions. Déjà vu simply exposes this in an evident, almost uncomfortable way. It shows the inner workings of the mind, unfiltered. Upon closer observation of this phenomenon, it becomes clear that the brain does not seek objective truth all the time. It seeks internal coherence. It seeks continuity. It seeks emotional security. When something deviates from the expected, as in déjà vu, the reaction is not to calmly investigate, but to try to maintain a sense of control, even if through intense emotion. This dynamic helps to understand why déjà vu seems so real, even though it's fleeting. The experience is short, but the impact remains. You come away wondering what just happened. And this doubt doesn't stem from logic, but from the clash between what was felt and what couldn't be explained. It's a small rupture in the way you perceive time, memory, and reality itself. All of this is part of an internal journey that happens without you realizing it. A journey where the brain tests interpretations, adjusts perceptions, and constructs meaning from sensations. Déjà vu is just one of the moments when this process becomes visible. It's not an isolated error, but a reflection of how the human mind operates when it needs to deal with the unexpected. And when you start to see déjà vu in this way, as an automatic reaction that precedes any rational thought, something changes. The experience ceases to be merely strange and becomes revealing. It shows that what seems true doesn't always have to be logical. Sometimes, it's just an intense feeling trying to fill an empty space of explanation. Comment below, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding that emotion comes before reason completely changes how we interpret not only déjà vu, but the human experience itself. There's a widespread idea that we are rational beings who analyze the world logically and only then feel something about it. But, in practice, the brain works almost the opposite way. It feels first, reacts first, and only then tries to organize all of that into a coherent explanation. When an experience occurs, the brain doesn't immediately ask, "Does this make sense?" The real, silent, and automatic question is different. Is this familiar? Is this safe? Does this matter? These evaluations don't go through language or conscious thought. They happen behind the scenes in milliseconds. And that's exactly where emotion takes center stage. It acts as a quick shortcut to interpret reality before logic has time to manifest itself. This emotional shortcut exists for a very simple reason. Throughout our evolution, sensing quickly has always been more important than thinking calmly. Recognizing danger, detecting patterns, reacting to unexpected situations required speed, not deep reflection. The brain learned to rely on emotional signals to make quick decisions. And even today, in a completely different world, this system remains active, shaping our mindset, our choices, and our perception of truth. In déjà vu, this mechanism appears almost blatantly. The emotion of familiarity arises before any rational analysis. There is no time to check memories, compare contexts, or seek explanations. The brain simply triggers the feeling of, "This has already happened." And this feeling is so strong that, for a moment, it seems more reliable than any logical argument. It's as if the emotion were saying, "Believe me," even when there is no proof. This happens because the brain treats emotions as signals of relevance. The more intense the emotion, the greater the impact. And impact, for the brain, is often confused with importance. This is a delicate and fascinating point. Often, what we feel strongly gains more weight than we can clearly explain. Déjà vu reveals this dynamic in a raw, almost uncomfortable way, showing that logic doesn't always come first. In this context, emotion acts like a lens. It colors the experience before reason can evaluate it. When this lens points to familiarity, even without a real basis, the brain assumes there is something there that deserves attention. Then that strange, hard-to-name feeling arises, as if a hidden truth were about to be revealed. But what is really happening is just an emotional shortcut being triggered out of turn. This process isn't unique to déjà vu. It's part of how we interact with the world all the time. Many important decisions stem from impressions, not detailed analyses. Many certainties come from feelings, not facts. The brain prefers a quick response to a perfect one. And this explains why, in many life situations, we feel something is true long before we have any concrete evidence. In the case of déjà vu, this emotional logic creates an intense experience precisely because reason cannot keep up. The brain senses something strong but finds no explanation. This disconnect generates strangeness, curiosity, and sometimes even a slight discomfort. It's as if the mind is trying to fit a piece that doesn't belong to any known puzzle. And faced with this void, emotion fills the space. This is one of the most interesting behind-the-scenes aspects of how the mind works. The brain doesn't like gaps. It seeks continuity, coherence, and meaning. When it doesn't find this in logic, it resorts to emotion as a way to maintain a stable internal narrative. Déjà vu then becomes a striking experience not because it reveals something extraordinary, but because it exposes this internal strategy very clearly. Upon closer observation, it becomes evident that emotion and reason do not compete on equal footing. Emotion takes precedence. It arrives first, influences perception, and only then allows reason to attempt to organize what remains. This order explains why so many experiences seem real even before they are understood. It explains why some sensations convince us without argument. And it explains why déjà vu leaves such a strong mark even though it is so brief. This understanding brings about a small transformation in how we look at our own reactions. We begin to realize that not everything we feel needs to be interpreted as absolute truth. Sometimes, it's just the brain using old shortcuts to deal with new situations. Déjà vu becomes less of a supernatural mystery and more of a revelation about how the mind constructs meaning from fleeting emotions and unconscious decisions. And the more we observe this phenomenon, the clearer it becomes that it's part of a larger journey. A journey in which we learn to recognize the limits of logic and the power of emotion. A journey in which we understand that the impact of an experience comes not only from what happens, but from how the brain chooses to feel it. Déjà vu is just one of the moments when this mechanism becomes visible. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because here lies the heart of the mystery that makes déjà vu so intense and so difficult to ignore. At some point in this process, the brain recognizes something, without knowing exactly what. It turns on the light of familiarity, but finds no concrete memory to support this feeling. It's as if a door has been opened, but the hallway on the other side is empty. And this emptiness doesn't go unnoticed. It's unsettling. The brain is extremely efficient at linking sensations to memories. When you recognize a face, a song, or a place, there's a well-defined pathway that connects the perception to the correct memory file. In déjà vu, this pathway fails. The feeling of "I've seen this before" appears strongly, but the system responsible for locating the corresponding memory finds nothing. No context, no past episode, no archived scene. Only the sensation. Only the echo of familiarity. This disconnect is what creates the profound sense of unease. The mind feels that something should be there, but it isn't. And the brain doesn't handle gaps well. It doesn't like blank spaces, incomplete explanations, unanswered questions. When it can't access a real memory, it enters a state of internal alert. Something deviates from the expected pattern. Something breaks the continuity of the experience. And when that happens, emotion takes over. This is a crucial point for understanding the emotional impact of déjà vu. It's not the familiarity itself that causes discomfort. It's the absence of memory associated with it. It's the feeling without origin. The brain interprets this as an error that needs to be resolved quickly. And since it doesn't find an immediate logical explanation, it responds with emotion. Mild anxiety, intense surprise, almost urgent curiosity. These are attempts to give weight to what has not been explained. This mechanism reveals much about the inner workings of the human mind. In normal situations, familiarity and memory go hand in hand. In déjà vu, they separate. And this separation creates internal tension. The mind senses that something is true but cannot prove it. It is a truth without evidence. An impression without foundation. And yet it seems real. This conflict between sensation and explanation is what makes déjà vu so striking. This lack of explanation also helps to understand why so many people describe déjà vu as something almost significant, as if there were a hidden message there. The brain associates familiarity with importance. If something seems familiar, it assumes it has relevance. When it doesn't find the memory, it doesn't dismiss the sensation. It intensifies it. It's as if it were saying, "This should make sense." And when it doesn't, the emotion intensifies. This emotional reaction is not a random error. It's part of an ancient strategy of the mind to deal with uncertainty. Faced with the unknown, feeling strongly has always been more effective than feeling nothing. The brain prefers to exaggerate the importance of something rather than ignore it. In déjà vu, this strategy appears unfiltered. Familiarity arises, memory fails, and emotion enters to fill the void. This also explains why déjà vu often leaves a lasting impression, even though it's fleeting. The experience passes, but the impact remains. You keep thinking about it because the brain couldn't close the loop. There was no clear resolution. There was no satisfactory explanation. And the mind tends to revisit unresolved experiences, trying to fit them somewhere into the internal narrative. This process is profoundly human. It doesn't only happen with déjà vu. It happens whenever we feel something we can't explain. Whenever a decision seems right without clear arguments. Whenever an impression weighs more than the facts. Déjà vu simply exposes this functioning, showing how the mind deals with the lack of answers using emotion as its main resource. When you understand this, the experience ceases to seem supernatural and becomes revelatory. Revealing about how the brain constructs meaning. Revealing about how familiarity can exist without memory. Revealing about how emotion arises to protect internal coherence when logic fails. Déjà vu becomes a mirror of our mentality, showing that feeling does not necessarily depend on remembering. This perception changes how we interpret the impact of déjà vu. It's not a sign of something hidden happening outside of you, but a sign of something happening inside your mind. A moment when the systems don't align perfectly. An instant when familiarity manifests itself, without the support of memory, creating an emotional short circuit that draws attention precisely because it deviates from the norm. And the more we observe this phenomenon, the clearer it becomes that the discomfort doesn't come from the error itself, but from the brain's attempt to maintain a continuous narrative of reality. It wants everything to make sense. When that doesn't happen, it feels it. It reacts. It tries to compensate. And it is precisely at this point that déjà vu ceases to be merely strange and becomes a window into understanding how the mind deals with uncertainties, quick decisions, and truths that seem real before they are confirmed. Comment below, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because understanding why déjà vu is almost never neutral reveals something essential about how the brain deals with the unknown. When this experience happens, it rarely goes unnoticed. It's not like any random thought that comes and goes. Déjà vu arrives with a specific emotional charge, almost as if the mind were trying to draw your attention to something it can't explain itself. It's very common for the first sensation to be one of strangeness. A slight displacement from reality, as if something were out of place, even if everything around seems perfectly normal. This strangeness doesn't come from the environment, but from within. It's the perception that something familiar has appeared uninvited, without warning, and without justification. The brain perceives this break in expectation immediately, and that's enough to trigger an emotional response. Next, many people feel a mild, almost subtle but present anxiety. It's not fear per se nor panic. It's a quick restlessness, a passing discomfort, as if the mind were trying to solve a puzzle and couldn't find the right pieces. This anxiety stems from uncertainty. The brain senses that something has happened, but it can't name, classify, or fit it into its own internal narrative. And when that happens, it reacts. There is also a curious sense of importance. Even when déjà vu lasts only a few seconds, it seems to carry more weight than it should. The mind treats that instant as something that deserves attention, as if it were a sign, a clue, or a revelation about to happen. This feeling doesn't arise by chance. The brain associates intense emotion with relevance. If something evokes strong feelings, it understands that it matters even without knowing why. This combination of strangeness, mild anxiety, and a sense of importance forms the emotional core of déjà vu. And the most interesting thing is to realize that these emotions are not responses to what is happening in the external world, but to the brain's inability to quickly explain what is happening internally. The human brain has been trained to interpret reality quickly. When this interpretation fails, emotion kicks in as a compensatory mechanism. From a mental perspective, what happens is both simple and profound. The brain detects something out of the ordinary, but doesn't find an immediate explanation. This delay in understanding creates a vacuum. And the brain doesn't tolerate emptiness well. It needs to fill gaps to maintain a sense of continuity and control. Emotion arises precisely to occupy this blank space. This mechanism helps explain why déjà vu is never just interesting. It always comes with an impact. The mind can't treat it as something trivial because it challenges usual logic. The brain associates anything it can't quickly explain with a potential risk or something that deserves special attention. It's a legacy of how we've been shaped over time. Faced with the unknown, feeling is faster than understanding. The nostalgia that some people report during déjà vu is also part of this process. It's not a nostalgia linked to a specific memory, but to a vague feeling of the past, of something that seems to have emotional significance. The brain tries to find known references to explain the inexplicable. And when it doesn't find a real memory, it evokes a feeling of emotional familiarity, as if saying, "This seems to come from somewhere important." This intense emotional response creates the impression that there is a hidden truth behind the experience. Something you should remember but don't. Something that is part of your journey but is out of reach. This impression doesn't stem from a real event, but from the brain's effort to maintain coherence. It prefers to suggest depth rather than admit confusion. It prefers emotion to silence. This pattern isn't limited to déjà vu. It appears whenever we are confronted with something we can't quickly explain. In important decisions, in intuitive judgments, and first impressions. Often, emotion arises as a provisional response while reason tries to catch up. Déjà vu simply exposes this functioning in a concentrated and intense way, almost like a spontaneous experiment of the mind with itself. Upon closer observation, it becomes clear that the brain associates emotion with that which escapes immediate logic because emotion offers direction. It points a way even if imprecise. It creates the feeling that something is happening, even when we don't know exactly what. This emotional impact is a way to keep the mind engaged, alert, and in motion. That's why déjà vu leaves its mark. Even though it's brief, it provokes reflection. It interrupts the automatic flow of everyday experience and forces the mind to confront its own limitations. It shows that not everything can be explained at the same pace as it is felt. And this time difference between feeling and understanding is what gives déjà vu its characteristic emotional power. When you begin to see déjà vu from this perspective, it ceases to be merely a strange phenomenon and becomes a window into understanding how the brain reacts to what is out of control. It reveals how emotion, anxiety, and a sense of importance arise as natural responses to a lack of explanation. And the more you realize this, the clearer it becomes that déjà vu is not about the past or the future, but about how the mind deals with the present when it escapes logic. Comment below, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because here we touch on one of the most powerful and most dangerous points in the workings of the human mind. The brain has a natural tendency to confuse emotional intensity with truth. When something is felt strongly, it assumes that it is real, relevant, and significant, even when there is no concrete evidence to support that feeling. This mechanism is not an isolated flaw. It's part of how the mind constructs its perception of reality. The brain doesn't evaluate the world solely through facts, it evaluates it through impact. The more intense the emotion, the greater the feeling of certainty. And this association happens automatically behind the scenes without you realizing it. It's as if the mind were saying, if this made me feel this much, then it must be true. In déjà vu, this process is completely exposed. The sensation arises charged with emotion, and the brain interprets this intensity as a sign of authenticity. For a few seconds, it doesn't matter that there is no real memory, past event, or logical explanation. The feeling is too strong to be ignored. It seems too profound to be false. And that's exactly where the mind is deceived. Intense emotion creates a compelling internal narrative. It gives weight to the experience. It gives the impression that there is something hidden there, a revelation about to happen, a connection that you should understand. The brain doesn't say, this is just a strange feeling. It says, this matters. And when something seems important, it begins to occupy space in consciousness in a very different way. This pattern explains why so many people describe déjà vu as something almost solemn, as if that instant had a greater meaning than the rest of the day. Even though it's brief, it stands out. Even though it's confusing, it seems clear. This happens because the emotional intensity creates a feeling of depth. And depth, for the brain, is often confused with truth. The most curious thing is that this mechanism works even when reason is absent. The mind doesn't need external confirmation to validate an intense emotion. It justifies itself. It reinforces itself. It creates internal coherence based on feeling, not on facts. Déjà vu then becomes a perfect example of how the mind can convince itself of something simply because it was felt strongly enough. This process isn't limited to strange experiences. It influences important decisions, quick judgments, and even personal beliefs. How many times has something felt right before you could even explain why? How many times has a feeling guided a choice without solid arguments behind it? The brain uses emotion as a criterion because emotion offers speed, direction, and impact. In the case of déjà vu, this emotional logic creates the illusion that the experience is more than it actually is. The momentary processing error gains the status of a significant event. The gap between familiarity and memory transforms into a feeling of revelation. The brain doesn't perceive the error as an error. It perceives the impact as a signal. And that's enough to generate temporary conviction. This is one of the most fascinating behind-the-scenes aspects of the mind. The brain isn't constantly seeking objective truth. It's seeking internal consistency. It wants the world to make sense quickly, even if that sense is provisional. When emotion is intense, it offers this feeling of immediate meaning. And the brain accepts it even knowing on some level that something doesn't quite fit. That's why déjà vu feels so real while it's happening, but loses its power when it passes. In the moment, emotion dominates. Then, when the intensity diminishes, logic begins to reclaim its place. The mind looks back and realizes there was nothing there. No memory, no hidden event, no deep explanation. But the emotional impact has already happened. The mark remains. This phenomenon reveals something important about our everyday mindset. We often believe that we think first and feel later. But the reality is different. We feel first, believe later, and only then try to justify it. Déjà vu exposes this order of functioning clearly, almost uncomfortably. It shows how emotion can create a temporary truth, even when logic confirms nothing. This confusion between intense emotion and truth also explains why déjà vu is so difficult to ignore. It interrupts the normal flow of experience because it activates this primitive validation mechanism. The brain doesn't ask, is this real? It asks, was this intense? And if the answer is yes, it treats the experience as something that deserves attention, reflection, and even reverence. Upon closer examination, it becomes clear that déjà vu is not about the past or the future. It speaks to the psychological present. It reveals how the mind constructs meaning in real time, using emotion as raw material. It shows how the feeling of truth can arise without facts, sustained only by the force of feeling. This realization triggers a subtle transformation in how you observe your own reactions. It becomes clearer that not everything that seems profound truly is. Sometimes it's just intense. Sometimes it's just an emotional shortcut working out of context. Déjà vu becomes less of a supernatural mystery and more of an honest revelation about the limits of human perception. And the more we understand this mechanism, the more we realize that it's not the exception but the rule. The brain interprets the world through emotional impacts all the time. Déjà vu simply exposes this in a few seconds, showing how a strong emotion can pass for truth, meaning, and even destiny, even if it's just a momentary processing error. Comment below, "This makes sense to me." Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because this is where many myths begin to fall apart, not aggressively but with clarity, respect, and a scientific basis. Déjà vu is often shrouded in mystical, spiritual, or almost prophetic interpretations, precisely because it provokes a sensation too intense to seem just something in the brain. But when we observe what really happens behind the scenes of the mind, it becomes clear that déjà vu is not intuition, it is not prediction, and it is not a memory from another life. It is, in essence, a temporary emotional short circuit. This doesn't diminish the experience. On the contrary, understanding what it truly is makes everything even more fascinating. The human brain is made up of systems that need to work in perfect synchronicity for reality to make sense. Perception, memory, and emotion usually operate in an integrated, almost invisible way. You see something, recognize it, feel it, and move on. In déjà vu, this integration fails for a few moments. And this failure creates the illusion of something extraordinary. What happens is that perception arrives first, laden with a sense of familiarity. Immediately afterward, the memory system fails to locate the source of this familiarity. At the same time, emotion enters the scene to try to maintain the coherence of the experience. It's as if three gears stop aligning perfectly for a few seconds. The result is neither a revelation of the future nor a forgotten memory of the past, but an internal conflict that generates emotional impact. This short circuit isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a natural consequence of the brain's complexity. Highly sophisticated systems are also subject to small synchronization errors. And when that happens, the mind tries to compensate. It fills in gaps, creates sensations, and assigns meaning even when there isn't enough data. This is a characteristic of the human mind. We prefer an imperfect explanation to no explanation at all. That's why déjà vu seems so convincing while it's happening. Emotion comes in to sustain the experience in place of logic. And as we've already seen, the brain tends to trust emotional intensity more than immediate rational verification. This opens up space for symbolic interpretations. Some people feel it was a warning. Others believe they've lived that scene before. But these interpretations don't arise from the experience itself, but rather from the brain's attempt to make sense of what escaped comprehension. From a scientific point of view, there is no evidence that déjà vu is linked to predictions of the future or memories of other existences. What exists are clear indications of a momentary failure in communication between areas responsible for recognizing, remembering, and feeling. It is a transient, common, and in most cases harmless phenomenon. The impact does not come from the event itself, but from the emotional reaction it evokes. This understanding brings something important: authority. Not in the sense of imposing a truth, but of offering an explanation that respects the experience of those who feel déjà vu without fostering illusions. You don't need to deny what you felt. The sensation was real. What isn't real is the interpretation that it reveals something supernatural. The feeling existed, the meaning attributed to it was constructed later. This point is crucial for building trust in those who speak on the subject. When we explain déjà vu as an emotional short circuit, we show that science and personal experience are not on opposite sides. They complement each other. Science explains the mechanism and experience shows the impact. One does not invalidate the other. On the contrary, together they reveal how powerful the human mind is, but also how vulnerable it is to its own shortcuts. This type of revelation provokes a silent transformation in the way you observe your own thoughts and sensations. You begin to realize that not everything that seems profound actually points to something hidden outside of you. Often it points inward, to the way the brain constructs meaning, makes quick decisions, and tries to maintain a stable narrative of reality, even when something goes off script. Déjà vu, viewed from this perspective, ceases to be a frightening or magical mystery and becomes an honest reflection of mental functioning. It shows how emotion, perception, and memory can momentarily become disconnected. And how, in those moments, the mind creates a sensation of truth without a concrete basis. This doesn't make the brain weak. It makes it human. And the more we understand this, the better prepared we become to deal with intense experiences without needing to attribute to them a meaning they don't possess. Déjà vu becomes a valuable clue about how the mind operates behind the scenes, how it reacts to the unexpected, and how it uses emotion to maintain a sense of continuity. It doesn't point to what will happen, nor to what has already happened. It points to the psychological now, to the instant when the gears fail and readjust themselves. This perception opens the door to something even more interesting because when we understand that déjà vu is an emotional short circuit, we begin to see other moments in life through the same lens. Situations where we feel certain without proof. Decisions that seem obvious without clear arguments. Impressions that carry too much weight. All of this follows the same internal logic, and it is precisely at this point that the conversation begins to gain an even deeper layer. Write this down, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because when we observe déjà vu attentively enough, it ceases to be merely a curious phenomenon and begins to function as a rather honest mirror of the human mind. A mirror that reveals something we don't always like to admit. We trust much more in what we feel than in what we truly understand. And déjà vu lays this bare in a few seconds without asking permission. Throughout this journey we're undertaking here, it becomes clear that the brain doesn't operate like a logical court in search of absolute truth. It functions much more like a narrator trying to maintain a coherent story about reality. And to do this, it uses the quickest and most effective tools it possesses: sensations, emotions, and impressions. Rational understanding comes later if it comes at all. Déjà vu shows exactly this process in action. When that familiar sensation arises without memory, when emotion appears before explanation, when intensity is mistaken for truth, the brain is simply being true to its own internal logic. A logic that prioritizes impact, continuity, and perceived meaning. Even if that meaning doesn't actually exist. Even if it's just a momentary processing error. The mind prefers to feel something strong rather than admit it doesn't know what's happening. This reveals something profound about our everyday mindset. In many life situations we follow this same pattern without realizing it. We make decisions based on feelings. We trust initial impressions. We give more weight to what seems true than to what has been carefully analyzed. Déjà vu is just a concentrated snapshot of this functioning, a moment when the inner workings of the mind become visible. The most interesting thing is that this characteristic is not a flaw. It's part of our transformation as a species. Sensing first has always been an advantage in unpredictable environments. The problem arises when we confuse this automatic reaction with deep understanding. Déjà vu reminds us, almost poetically, that sensation is not synonymous with understanding. That emotional impact does not guarantee truth. That intensity does not mean real meaning. This perception changes how you begin to observe not only déjà vu, but various other internal experiences. Thoughts that seem too certain. Emotions that arise strongly without a clear reason. Convictions that appear before any argument. All of this follows the same mechanism. The brain creates a sense of certainty to maintain a stable narrative, even when the data is incomplete. Déjà vu also reveals how uncomfortable we are with the void of explanation. The human mind dislikes blank spaces. It prefers an imperfect story to no story at all. It prefers a provisional truth to admitting ignorance. And it is at this point that emotion and meaning intertwine. When we don't understand something, we feel it. When we can't explain it, we attribute importance to it. When logic fails, emotion takes on the role of guide. This creates a curious inner journey, where feeling becomes a kind of compass. Not always reliable but extremely persuasive. Déjà vu is a powerful reminder that this compass exists and influences much more than we imagine. It shows us that the mind doesn't wait for permission from reason to act. It builds experiences, interpretations, and even beliefs based on what it feels first. By viewing déjà vu in this way, something transforms in the way you relate to your own sensations. You begin to realize that not everything that seems profound needs to be taken literally. That some experiences are intense precisely because they expose the limits of understanding. That feeling is not wrong, but it is also not proof. Déjà vu becomes a small revelation about how we function when logic cannot keep up with the speed of emotion. This reflection often lingers even after the experience has passed. Because, at its core, it's not just about a strange brain phenomenon. It's about how we construct our perception of reality every day. About how emotions shape decisions. About how sensations create temporary truths. about how the mind prefers emotional coherence to logical precision. And perhaps that's precisely what makes déjà vu so striking. It doesn't offer ready-made answers or comfortable explanations. It leaves a feeling in the air, a silent question, an invitation to observation. It reminds us that understanding the human mind is not just about accumulating information, but about learning to recognize the shortcuts it uses to navigate the world. When you start looking at déjà vu as a window into this process, it ceases to be just an isolated event and becomes part of something bigger. A journey of self-discovery. An investigation into how we feel, decide, and believe. And the more you reflect on it, the more you realize that déjà vu doesn't demand an immediate response. It simply prompts a more attentive look inward. Comment below, I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, this topic probably resonated with something inside you. So feel free to subscribe to the channel because the idea here is precisely to continue exploring these mysteries of the mind in a calm, deep, and honest way, without ready-made answers, but with reflections that truly help us understand how we function on the inside. If this makes sense to you, leave a comment saying so. I'm with you until the end, or, this message was for me. I like knowing who has walked this path together, and it also shows the channel itself that this type of conversation is worth continuing. And if, at any point during this video you felt you made a connection, whether through curiosity, identification, or reflection, a like is a simple way to register that. It helps this content reach people who might be asking the same questions as you. There's a video over here that complements this topic and delves even deeper into this journey through the human mind. Click on it and continue watching.